Welcome to my lair. My name is Rene Rafael. And I also go by the name Remnandt. What's a remnant? It's a word, like many others. But for me, it means what's left. It's used in that context a lot. It also happens to be misspelled, and that's on purpose. And that symbolism will become a little bit more apparent, the reasoning for that, in an upcoming music video. But as I look back on my life, there's so many things that I've had to strip away, sometimes purposefully, sometimes by no choice of my own, and they were just taken from me. And what was left at this stage in my life is what's the most important to me. So, not necessarily bad things to have your life be stripped away and have just the bare essentials left behind so you can see what's truly important. I've got about 10 or probably more albums at this point in varying degrees of completion. Over 42 years of material after having gone through the drugs, the prescribed medications, so many stories that I've lived and so many that I've written down or I've recorded to varying degrees or just have graphic imagery stored on hard drives or on VHS tapes. But what we're watching today, what you are watching today, is a pre-sneak preview of Album 1. And Album 1 is a self-titled album, Remnandt. Why not? It's good to introduce yourself in the first album. I think I've seen a lot of people do that, and I agree with that method. So this is what I'm doing. What is a pre-sneak preview? Well, it's, I guess, a little earlier than a sneak preview. Yeah. And you can see in the top left, in some of these images I'll be sharing, you'll see the actual track number as it currently stands. My visioning for the completed album, Remnandt. Remnandt.com, that's my home away from home, my artist home away from home. And I have my story there. And this story dives into more of what I went through in life to get to this point where I'm now finally doing my music and my speaking. And my bio there, it encapsulates a few different pieces, but there's two main quotes that I gravitate and have gravitated to over the years. This first one, when you reach out to touch the world, may it never hurt you. And I am quoting my mom here, she's getting this from some other place too. She's morphed it into her own thing. But this was something she wrote down for me in my baby book. And I looked back over the years, went into my baby book and found this and thought, this is appropriate. This is appropriate because the opposite has happened, as it does with so many of us. You're born, you experience the world. The world is exciting. You want to touch it. You want to experience it. But it does get back to you. And sometimes, most of the time, you get hurt from these experiences until you learn something valuable. And then the second quote, and it's hard to read, so I'm going to cheat. Other people are going to find healing in your wounds, your greatest life messages, and your most effective ministry will come out of your deepest hurts. And this comes from a book by Richard Dwayne Warren, The Purpose-Driven Life. And this quote seems to be the opposite of what my mom has been hoping for in the baby book. Somewhat opposite. So I like playing off those. This image here is an attempt that I made with my daughter to recreate visually what it was like to have been on all these medications over the years. And the story, if and when you go to Remnandt.com and listen to it, this image will make a lot more sense because I dive into how this felt, just having all your senses shut down for so many years. It really was like being in a fishbowl that you could not escape from. You could see the outside world, but you just couldn't touch it, couldn't smell it, couldn't see it very well because it was all frosted over. I'll leave you with those. But this is a 3-hour project that my daughter and I embarked on. I just described to her what it was that I wanted to encompass visually, and she's become quite the graphic artist, and this is what she did in 3 hours with me just sitting there saying, yeah, that looks really good, except maybe this icicles, I want some icicles, like grabbing the fishbowl and constricting it and squeezing it, and I want this frost layer to be on the edges of the icicles, and she'd be like, oh yeah, and she'd erase and create a new layer and start from scratch in some places. And it was an awesome experience, and it led to this. And this is probably something I will use in upcoming images for my albums as well as animations. This is my symbol. R for Rene, Rafael, and Remnandt. Remnandt Records. That's my music publishing company. And it was made along with this next image with an application that I've been working on over the years to take sound and paint it. I do a speech, my signature speech, called Addicted to a Single Fate. And in this speech, I cover the trilogy that's been my life. The before drugs, during drugs, and then AD, after drugs. And I go into excruciating detail. There's some painful moments. There's some funny moments. There's some, dang, did you really go through that moments? But there's a lot of hope moments too. But what I don't cover in this speech, at least in its current incarnation, is this track that I hope to include in my album, Remnandt, on communication itself. Why the interest? What is this intro to communication as it relates to my experiences growing up? I needed to communicate ever since I can remember. It was not a need as in I felt I wasn't getting it and I had to find a way to get it. No, that happened after I got on the medications, after I was 9 years old. But before that, I just needed to communicate in many different ways. I loved recording things. I had this Fisher Price tape recorder. Started off there. That was my first foray into the documentary portion of my life. And I would go around and just record anything. I knew so many kids that did similar. And I remember the parents being somewhat annoyed to hear their voices played back at the wrong moments. And it was this thing that all these younger kids were just going around with their Fisher Prices and just recording things. And this was awesome for me. I really enjoyed creating moments that didn't exist. I would actually go out of my way to cause a situation so that I could record it. And then I graduated to many different things. Went from the Fisher Price to a micro cassette recorders. And then I went to digital recorders. I always had a plethora of books lying around. Lots and lots of books that I would fill. And these books would grow. These diaries amassed over the years. And eventually I was left with stuff like this. Big files of books and music and unfinished lyrics and cassettes just jam-packed in many file boxes. One quick story I want to share about the recording, because I started alluding to this about creating situations that didn't exist for enjoying their playback later on. There was a time that I used to visit Puerto Rico a lot with my cousins. And we used to play all these board games that my grandmother had at her house. One of them was Risk. And we get the pieces out, lie them on the floor, and pretend we understood the rules. Tried the best we could. I was, I believe, 13 and younger. And I would bring my tape recorder and cause fights. And one of the fights that I caused was I moved some pieces from the Risk board away from one of my cousin's stockpile and put it into another cousin's stockpile without them seeing this. But then eventually they figured out somebody had cheated. They didn't know who it was, but they saw that, you know, next door to them, this cousin, well, my cousin, their brother had more pieces than they should have. And so a fight broke out. And I remember a lot of yelling and eventually a trip that happened because they were pushing and shoving each other. And I thought, oh, this is great. I'm recording this live. This is like reality TV. Like I had invented reality TV prior to reality TV being around in my mind. And so this fight is breaking out and I'm recording this Big Brother style. And it wasn't enough because there wasn't any physical movement. They were just kind of like pushing. So I stuck my foot out in between the two and caused one of them to trip. And so this guy went down. I'll say Rich. He fell, landed on his knee on one of the big plastic trays of the Risk carts that have all the little pieces in it. And the plastic was very, feeble, so it broke. But it shrapneled into his knee in a million pieces. And so you have on this recording a fight, a crash, a trip, and then mom and the other mom running into the room. What's going on? What's broken? Who did? So anyways, I'll stop there. But these are the kinds of things I would love to instigate and record. I would write a lot of stories. And one of the stories that I needed to write was about The Fox and the Hound, because I loved this movie. Growing up, it had a huge impact on me, and I recall that there was a lot of death, or at least threats about death in this movie. And around this time, I think I might have been about, I don't know if I was 6, but I had just discovered death in a few years previous to this. I had learned that Abraham Lincoln apparently died. Oh, and until then, I didn't know that good people died. I thought Abraham Lincoln, yeah, I'd heard about this guy. He was a good dude, so he must still be alive. And then all of a sudden I found out, no, he died a long time ago. And my whole worldview completely shook. I was like, oh my God, so good people die too? This sucks. So anyways, that's the backstory to this story. So The Fox and the Hound. I had been experimenting mentally with death because it had thrown me for a loop for a few years. And I would write stories. And in this case, I wrote a book called The 5 Lives of Todd. And it was about 5 different, very gruesome ways in which this cat died. And I guess since he wasn't a real cat, I must have thought, well, real cats have 9 lives back then, I thought. So a fox, not a real cat, he must have only 5. I'm not sure where that logic came from, but this book tormented my brother because he really loved Todd, and it made him cry. And I remember leaving this book outside that I wrote, and the rain got to it and washed it away. But my parents found it. Actually, my next door neighbor, my babysitter's mother, found it and brought it to my mom. And she said, hey, you may want to ask your son about this. It's a little concerning. It's got a lot of details about death. And anyway, long story short, my mom came and talked to me about this. And I remember there was a song at the very end of The 5 Lives of Todd, something like, Todd is dead, no one gives a dread because Todd is dead, Todd is dead, and Todd is dead, no one gives a dread because Todd is dead. Yeah, that's a little bizarre for someone at age 6. But this is just one example of stories that would get me in trouble. I got called in by the principal in I believe in 2nd grade because I had written a story about a bunch of animals that didn't feel life was worth living anymore. And I wasn't suicidal. It wasn't anything like that. Again, experimenting with death. Remember, I found out that Abraham Lincoln had died, and this bothered me. So this story was about everybody in my classroom in 2nd grade. I took an animal that I thought looked or resembled the equivalent person in my classroom, and I named this animal the same first name as the person in my classroom. And so everybody in my classroom had a part in this story, and these animals were going up to the roof and telling each other, hey, we should jump off because tomorrow is not going to exist. There's no more life for us. We should just end it now. And I remember there was drinking involved. I don't know where I saw drinking. I didn't grow up in a family where there were alcoholics that I could see, so I'm not sure why drinking was involved, but drinking was involved. And they were getting on the ceiling fan on the roof. If you watched any of my previous videos, you'll remember that the ceiling fan was a staple for entertainment in the Vogt-Lowell household. And so it's not a surprise to me that made it into this story as well. But these stuffed animals were getting onto the ceiling fan and causing themselves to get hit by the fan blades, jumping into it, similar to jumping off the roof. So just like the 5 Lives of Todd, where my next door neighbor's mother came and talked to my mom about this time the principal of my school asked my parents to check into me to see if I was okay. So my intro to communication involved a lot of scary creative writing. But it didn't stop there. I loved recording video as well. This is an image of a semi-closed elevator. And I would, in college, I would go around and create more situations that didn't exist that were film-worthy, I thought. And in this case, I would get into the elevator in a green duffel bag. See that there? This is a green duffel bag that I brought to college, and I fit inside that. I could close that entire thing up and exist inside that bag for long periods of time because it was porous. As long as I brought some food in there, it was all right. But why would I do this? I would record people getting into the elevator, asking themselves, what is that? Do we need to take this down to the lobby? Should we call the RA? Just concerned conversation about this anonymous bag. And every once in a while, somebody would get curious enough to go and touch the bag. And at this point, I would take it upon myself to either leap out of the bag or, shake the bag around and fall over and get all frustrated and say, hey, I'm trying to sleep in here, or some dumb thing, that I would say to cause commotion in the elevator and scare the people. And then I would record all this stuff. It's a close-up of the bag. Just here is a reminder to me to actually find the video footage because I've got in my closet somewhere buried with tons of other video, VHS and microcassettes. There exists some video footage of this that I want to find. And my need for communication stemmed from the books, from the tape recorders, the micro recorders, the VHS, and even code. For some reason, code was very important to me to be able to take the visuals out of my head. I had lots of visuals in my head growing up, bouncing around, lots of music, lots of imagery. And over the years, I created some mobile apps, but before I got to the mobile apps, before the actual drugs took over, I remember being introduced to the Commodore 64. And I thought, wow, this is cool. I'm going to take these things inside my head and finally show them to somebody else. But this didn't happen because right around this time I was also put on medication for the next 26 years. So this all disappeared. And over time, I got this feeling that I just wasn't good enough because I'd come from all these non-drug years, these 9 years of super creativity. Getting in trouble with a principal and the next door neighbor's mom and all that stuff, but and making my brother cry and other people cry when I recorded them. But I had been through so much creativity and then immediately shut down at age 9. And the next 26 years were just miserable to the point where I felt like I had nothing I could give my family that was worth their time. And so this is this demerit badge that I picked up along the way on one of our family travels. It was something that reminded me of this feeling I had inside. And I wore it like a badge of honor, a badge of shame, but I proudly wore that thing. I taught myself to do that, and I still have this badge. It's just something that I carry with me to remember, but not to sulk, just to remember that I'm past it. Communication was very difficult throughout those years, and one of the things that I wanted to do was be an actor, I thought. Musician, that came later, but acting, for some reason, is something I wanted to do first. And I remember not being able to really communicate that with my family. I had plans to go off to LA. I was going to travel there for a summer. This is now in college. I'm thinking about one summer after college, I was going to go to LA, and I really wanted my parents to accept this and, cheer me on. Just be excited for me. But I wasn't able to really spell it out. Every communication attempt for me was so indirect back then. Part of it was the drugs for sure, but I think a big part of it too was the fear of being judged. I loved symbolism and poetry so much that I would often write things to convey my overall feeling about something, but I would never directly, I wouldn't say never, but I would often not be direct enough to spell things out and say, this is what I really want in life. Instead, I would paint a picture and say, guess what I really want in life. Take a look. What do you think these visuals mean? So that's what this next thing is. This track here, Time to Timber, was my attempt, if I should call it that, to spell out for my family that I was going to California and I was going to try to be an actor. Why do I grow into you? No growth in me. Just infiltrate others with my roots of tantric despair. I'll suck the life out of you. Leave you dry. Replenish your energy? Oh, sure, fine. I become parasitic again. You become my host again. No mutualism here. Rain clouds my mind in loneliness. It cloaks my every thought with a superficial understanding. Ouch. Fraudulence just rots away in an eye blink. Some people feed off rain. I just rot. I'm useless. Can't even use me for firewood. I'm so soaked in my disillusions. My vision is far off into the west, over a lush green valley. It rests upon a dying sun I cannot die with, nor can I live with. Vision is all I have, no voice, except for this old owl. He's my dusty consciousness living within this deteriorating frame. And he calls out into the wild night. Whoo! Whoo! Who are you? He sleeps the day away. Lucky are those who replenish their energy, who feed off rain, who have vision, who have voice, who have movement. Their tomorrows could have been my yesterdays had I not been so fearfully stubborn. All that's left for me is a September chill. No salivation, as my leaves are blown to the ground, never to grow back again. Whack! Yes. My friends, the lumberjacks, are coming. And so this was another example of something that got my parents' attention, but in a, I guess, somewhat negative way. My mom read this, and it scared her. She thought the visual allegory was more than just visual. And I understand that, because, at the very end, you have the lumberjacks. Well, all throughout, there's this symbolism of death, but the lumberjacks just cut me down. I'm useless. Can't even use me for firewood. So where was I going with that? But the point for me here in this intro to communication segment, which is now transferred over to time to timber, is that communication was never a direct thing for me growing up, especially with the meds. And so one of the things that is so very important for me now when I talk to my kids is to be direct. Even if you're afraid of being judged or of hurting another person by being direct, don't hold this stuff in. Let people know exactly what you're feeling, because if you don't, it just grows. This thing inside you, the bitterness, the confusion, the frustration, and also for the other people who are interacting with you. These things grow for them too, and it's just not worth waiting until years go by and then all of a sudden have all these misunderstandings happen. It's unnecessary pain. So this next segment here, Greyhound, this is a track that I do a cappella at the moment. And the story behind this one is going back and forth to college, always taking the Greyhound, most of the time. My parents would drop me off at the Greyhound station, and I would go to Columbus. I went to Ohio State. And either my wife, my soon-to-be wife back then, would pick me up, or one of my friends. But it was a very lonely experience. It was an experience of shame each time I got on the Greyhound. And the reason for that, many reasons, but I'm the oldest of 4 kids. Again, you know the thing about the medications. And one of the things I cover in my signature speech is this idea that I always looked down to my younger siblings, looked up down, I would say, to try to imitate them because they would succeed at everything. These younger guys I would look up to is what I'm trying to say. And normally that role is reversed. You have the younger siblings looking up to their older brother or sister. And so this was a very embarrassing thing for me. And just being at the Greyhound station each time on my way back to college reminded me of this. Because I had gone through about 7 different majors, each time not really being able to apply myself or feeling like it wasn't interesting enough for me to do, and so I would change my mind, and I just felt like I wasn't making it worth my family's dime. So I'd be here waiting for the Greyhound to pick me up, worried about not being able to achieve things in life, and knowing my parents were paying for this, and just feeling quite lousy. And at this particular moment, when I wrote this track is called Greyhound, but it's actually a poem, a letter that I wrote to my mom while I was at the Greyhound. And I was at a point in life where I just didn't think that college was something I was going to succeed at, no matter how hard I tried. Where was I about to leave? Good friends of mine to enemies it seems. And mother, what would you like me to say? We'll say nothing, for all I have to do is wash it away. Imagine I have 2 pills in this cup. Dizzy now, it all seems so clear. I'm straight right now, but clarity I tend to fear. Let me go. I've tried this shit before. Oh, my head hangs low. I've lied to you for what I couldn't be, for what I couldn't be. And throw it away. All that you've taught me, my belligerent fray. Try to cope, but it's not me. I don't want to hurt you. Sometimes I hurt enough for both of us. I'd never desert you, but I'm living on the midnight bus and smile for me. Stop saying I'm giving up. Won't go down on one knee. Won't go down on one knee. I'm tired of living up to someone's invisible expectations. You know I've got my own. Again, I dearly love you, whether in the right direction or not. I've grown. I've grown, Mother, I've grown. So a very tough letter to write for sure, and I wasn't even sure that it would become a letter I would deliver to her. I was in the bathroom. I'm always in the bathroom when I'm writing stuff, if you know me. But I'm in the bathroom at the Greyhound station writing this on a bathroom stall. Not directly, I wasn't graffitiing. I had a piece of paper. Come on, you know. But nasty place to be writing this, and I even still have the lyrics on the original paper that I I smeared up against that dirty stall. Yeah. And this was something that I eventually did sing to her many years later, but like every indirect communication attempt, I didn't want her to feel the pain as much as I felt in this. So I tried to soften it up by joking around after I sang it. It was the most awkward thing in the world. So here you got this really sentimental song you sing to your mom in the basement of your house. She's captive audience. And then I follow it up with this commercial that I had seen on, I think it was YouTube. It was English as a Second Language commercial. I'm not going to sing the lyrics because it's really nasty, but imagine a family of four getting into a car. They don't speak English, but you don't know that yet. You're just watching them in this car, and they turn on the radio station as they're going to go drive off, and they start jamming to something that says some really explicit language about doing something to one of your body parts. Really nasty stuff, but the parents and the kids are all jamming to this. They really are enjoying this. And then all of a sudden, in the back, you see the kids jamming to it, and then a subtitle says, "Need to learn English? Check out whatever course on learning English, blah, 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 blah." So why did I just say that? Just to tell you that since I felt so awkward about singing the Greyhound song of my mom, and I didn't want to hurt her, I tried softening it up by singing the nasty, explicit lyrics of that commercial right after the Greyhound sensitivity. That was the most awkward combination. Ah, 1990 summer trip. So this is a trip that my dad took for us. He took 6 or 7 weeks off of, not his work, he brought his work with him, but he took 6 or 7 weeks off of the normal way in which he conducted his business so that we as a family could drive around in a camper. And it was the most amazing thing I had ever experienced in my life. It really touched me. So much so that I, later on, 17 years after the fact, made a compilation of the entire event. My dad had taken 8 hours of excruciating video on VHS. And you remember the big honking camera that I showed earlier, the kind that weighs you down on your shoulder and gives you all kinds of back problems, is what he used. And he recorded 8 hours. So I took this stuff one Christmas, it's probably many months before Christmas because I was going to give this as a present, and I distilled the 8 hours down into the most interesting pieces. And I made 2 music videos out of this as well. So I had a I believe it was a 3 DVD album set. I'll show you in a second what it looked like here. But it contained the 2 DVDs of the 8 hours with uncut stuff, and then 1 DVD of just the highlights, 45 minutes of that stuff, where it was mostly the close-ups of the family and things that the interactions between us, right? And then I created 2 music videos based off of that 45 minutes of material as well. And I gifted these to each of my family members during Christmas. This is the DVD menu, the intro menu. And I'm going to stop it here because I don't want to divulge too much. Not yet. But this DVD menu had the title National Vogt-Lowell's Vacation. And this was a riff off of the National Lampoon's Vacation. And I titled it as such because one of the things that had plagued me throughout my childhood, many things, but this specific thing was my relationship with my father. He's an awesome dude. I understand that now. As a dad, as a provider, as someone who has gone through so many of the things that he has had to go through. But back then, I wanted not necessarily his undivided attention all the time. I felt like my brother and sister had that. I just wanted respect. I wanted to be understood. I wanted to share a feeling of camaraderie with him. He was my father. I mean, this is, a lot of people go through that. But so back to the title of the National Vogt-Lowell's Vacation. This was my attempt, the titling of this album, to play off of some humor that I thought he would appreciate, because he really loved the National Lampoon's Vacation. Back then, they were always imitating Chevy Chase. That was a big person for us back then as a family. And my father's humor, up until this point, really hadn't landed well on me. Like, I would never understand his humor. And likewise, I would say things that I thought was funny, and my dad would be like, "What's wrong with you?" And up until now, you've heard a few examples of some of the things I would do, so this probably makes sense to you if you're watching as to why my dad would react that way. So I thought, maybe if I can bridge the gap here by labeling this album something off of the type of humor my dad thinks is funny, maybe this will get us connected better. Silly, small, trite example, seemingly insignificant, just a title, but I thought through that so excruciatingly. I spent so much time trying to come up with the perfect title because of that. It's amazing to me that I did that. It's ridiculous. This thing that came in from the right is the actual album cover. So the previous thing on the left would have been the DVD menu as you're playing it, but on the right's the actual cover of the album. And this is... Give me a second here to watch that.
Hey.
All right, let's stop that.
Me.
That thing you just saw there with me dancing in front of lightning or whatever it was, Recessive Genes Productions. This was another self-deprecating thing I did to myself, but I had this intro, which I'm not going to bore you with because it's about 7 minutes long, but I forced all of my family members, before they ever watched the DVD, they had to sit through the 7-minute intro where I explained why I did this. Why did I create this album? It was important to me that they understood that. And I made sure that they watched 7 minutes of that, explaining every single reason why. And some of the things I talked about in there were trying to recall what had happened. Because I had spent so much time forgetting things, being on the medications, I never remembered the chain of events very well while under the influence. And that actually was another reason why I recorded so many things because I would later go back to them and review them to see if I remembered them correctly. So that was one of the reasons. And another reason was I created this album for my family because it was the last time I remember us being able to spend so much time together before all the complexes, before all of the difficulties in life and the feeling embarrassed and going through puberty and the high school bullies and just growing apart from each other while we deal with life that happens to us. Back then, I still felt like we were so innocently just traveling the country. I mean, we traveled the country. We went all the way down from Cleveland down to the tip of Miami, Florida, into Mexico, then all the way up the West Coast. It's crazy what we did. And I just wanted them to know how how important this was to me that I got to experience it. So that's why I created that for them to understand. This is one of the music videos coming up next, Rearview. And there is a second part to this that I am creating. I'll talk about that after I play it.
In the dim twilight, I don't need precise. Everything between you and me, my heart already sees. Another desert roadside, still through the window at the passing at tide. The rearview mirror so full of so many places. But if we take a step back, we see familiar faces. Another fork in the road, stop and end. And I hope that this journey never ends. So we drive on.
So that was Rearview. And this song is what I was talking about when I said the last time that we felt innocent, looking in that rear view and remembering that song. That's what that meant to me. One thing I do want to share is that Rearview has a part 2, and this part 2, it's a wish that I have. I want to be able to take my kids on a similar trip. And it was, while I was creating this video, I was thinking about that. I was thinking, I've got to leave a spot here for when I take my kids out to the same spots, the same places that we travel to, and then piece all these things together into one music video so that you see me and my siblings with my parents, and then me with my wife and my kids reenacting some of the same scenarios. That always seems so powerful to me, and I wanted to do that. The second half of that is just written at the moment. I'll share with you what I have, but the tune here might be a little different.
Hey, I want you to know that I'll be there always and regardless of the cost to me.
Hey, I want you to know I'll always care despite the anger you might feel while I discipline both you and me. Do-do-do, another fork in the road. Do-do. And in the family tree. Mm-mm. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You'll both move away and one day meet the person of your dreams. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Will you continue what I taught you and improve it for the best? Mm-hmm. Small humble rumblings that I pass to you, I want you to surpass and to perfect. My intentions, they fall to the floor. I'd live for all of this and more. So that would be the second half of Rearview. Looking forward. It's foresight. Rearview, foresight. So on to truth. I'm going to switch up the sound over here. Truth was a song that I originally wrote while on Ohio State's campus. I was actually living off campus in an apartment building with my soon-to-be wife. And I had tried picking up the guitar many times and dropping it. Like, not spending disciplined time learning the instrument, but just, oh, I'm going to learn it all one day. Oh, it didn't work. I'm frustrated. I give up. And I got better at that. Sometimes I would spend 2 days and before I gave up, or a week, and then a month. But it was always very difficult to be able to play the guitar. It's always been a very stressful thing for me because I can sing okay, but I've always wanted to be able to play the guitar with the singing. And I remember when I wrote the words to this song in this apartment, and I sang while playing them. And I can't do that now because I can't remember how to play this on the guitar. But I remember back then I cried because I was able to play the guitar and sing the words. And not only was I able to do that, but the words had meant so much to me that I thought, okay, all the pain that I've lived through was worth it. I remember thinking that at that point. I thought, okay, if only for this one song and nothing else ever comes out of my life that's good, it was worth the pain I went through because this song is beautiful. Now, put that song up on a pedestal so you can be very judgmental of it now, right? Bring it up, but it doesn't matter. It's just, that's my memory. Can you see the truth in me, the truth in you? I always knew, and everywhere that I go, you'll be there. In this I know, our family so fragile. Let me see one more time you smile. I'll trap it inside a jar, along with shells, memories and scars. And every time that it rains, we can open up our jars again. So every time that it rains,
So open up your jaws again.
That last scene was over in Universal Studios, and Minnie Mouse scared the heck out of my youngest sister, Nicole. You can kind of see the way she's looking at her there. She's not happy. So I've sung the 2 music videos that I created, and there's a little bizarreness to that, because the way I thought back then was a lot more slowed down because of medications. And one of the things I noticed is that my music reflected that a lot. The tune, the cadence, just very slow. And trying to match that now, there's some nostalgia there, but there's also this, ooh, I can't wait to revamp this. This is going to be a part 1 and a part 2 song where you get to contrast what it sounded like before with what it is now. So there's a lot of intrigue for me to be able to massage the past with the present and future here on these 2 videos. Lots of ideas. This last one that I'll leave you with is called Small Mental Room. And this is a song, so I will say that I tried getting off the medications many times in my past. And by many, let's just say handful, maybe 5, 6. Each time mostly cold turkey, and each time ending in utter catastrophe. But I had a feeling that I knew being on the medications was wrong, regardless of how many people were telling me I had to, and all the benefits that I was getting from being on these. But I remember after having created these 2 music videos with that 1990 summer trip for my family, I wrote a lot of music. A lot of music. This was one of the songs that I wrote back then, and there were these songs that I would write to try to climb out of the need to use medications. And it was always so frustrating because when I would try to play the guitar, my concentration was not there. It wasn't even a matter of having the dexterity to play the instrument or the theoretical knowledge of how to do so. Those didn't even matter. I wasn't even there yet. I couldn't even focus long enough on the chords and the strings to be able to play something before I would screw up. I mean, that's an elaborate way of explaining, hey, I'm not good at guitar. And I'm sure everybody that tries to play the guitar to some extent feels that way when they're starting off. But I spent probably about a good solid 2.5 years playing the guitar consistently, like almost every day, and still struggling so badly with trying to just have concentration long enough to complete a riff, to complete a chorus, to just be able to switch between 3 or 4 different chords without having it sound like I was just dying trying to find the positioning for my fingers. It's as like I was swimming in molasses, and everything was slow paced. So this song specifically, Small Mental Room, is the feeling I had as I got off the drugs during one of these many attempts that I went cold turkey, and the realization of how much life had changed around me, and how much I had missed out, and how much I was going to have to change the way I look at the world and adapt and survive. And up until now, I'd only been allowed to live in this small mental room. I'm in this room here, very similar in size to the room that I used to occupy when I was writing these songs. And so the symbolism here is not just the small space in my head, made smaller by the medications, but also the small space in the room of isolation that I felt, because I would be ad nauseum trying to get myself to learn the guitar, not being able to, and being so isolated from everything else, including people. So that's what this song is, and this one I'm going to actually play on the guitar, and I'm nervous about that. Need some space for this song. Move around just a little bit. Remember that image? Yeah. That's the feeling behind this song right here. Discovery, new memoir sewn into the fabric of my memory. The ocean calls me on my shipwrecked intentions, afloat towards my own destiny. The stars above, sometimes they guide me, as long as I'm willing to lose myself in their eternity. But bound by Earth's oceans, kills me when the oceans above await my escape from her gravity. I woke up one day to find that I wasn't at home. My mind had entered the unknown. Everything about the world that I knew had changed. Everything in my small mental room would need to be rearranged. Insanity, locked inside the cargo hold, only with a broken mirror for my vanity. Monetary duality, two sides of me on a coin. I flipped into the abyss as I dismiss my own plurality. Can you buy me? Can you buy me some time? I need some more of that. Can I sell it? Can I sell a small mental room with a view over a sea of cataracts? I woke up one day to find that I wasn't at home. My mind had entered the unknown. Everything about the world that I knew had changed. Everything in my small mental room would need to be rearranged. Previously discovered lands in my mind had been erased. Everything that I
I woke up one day to find that I wasn't at home. I'm headed into the unknown. Everything about the world that I knew had changed. Everything in my small little room would need to be rearranged. That was Small Mental Room. There's a little bit of anger in there, but it's a fun kind of anger. It's not an anger that persists. It's an anger of passion that I got through this. There's still so much more to get through. Now I'm just trying to live my dreams so that, for a lot of reasons, but one of them just so that my kids don't give up on theirs. I want them to see that Dad believes it's possible. So I want to thank all my FSA compatriots, Fearless Speaker Academy, as well as FSE, Fearless Speaker Emergence. I want to thank all my KEG compatriots, Kingdom Entrepreneurs, and everybody else who may be watching. There's a lot of people to thank. This was day 30.